VO2 community, welcome back to the channel. Robert Linkul, trainingtheolderadult.com, and we are on our third episode here of reviewing Peter Attia's Outlive, chapter 11. We are discussing a topic, I'll read you a little bit, and then we'll open up on it. Okay, here we go. Third episode. We need more specific guidance to help us achieve our goals, and to do so in a way this is efficient but also safe. But first I want to spend some time exploring why exercise is so important, because I find the data around it to be so persuasive. When I share these data with my patients, they are rarely surprised by the fact that high aerobic fitness and strength are associated with longer lifespan and health span, but they're always amazed by the magnitude of the benefit. The data on exercise tells us with great clarity that the more we do, the better we will be. Let's start with cardiorespiratory and aerobic fitness. This means how efficiently your body can deliver oxygen to your muscles and how effectively your muscles can extract that oxygen, enabling you to run or walk or cycle or swim long distances or lift. In this case, it also comes into play in daily life, manifesting as physical stamina. The more aerobically fit you are, the more energy you will have for whatever you enjoy doing, even if your favorite activity is shopping. It turns out that peak aerobic cardiorespiratory fitness, measured in terms of VO2 max, is perhaps the single most powerful marker for longevity. VO2 max represents the maximum rate at which a person can utilize oxygen. This is measured naturally while a person is exercising at essentially their upper limit of effort. If you have ever done this test, you will know just how unpleasant it is. The more oxygen your body is able to use, the higher your VO2 max. Okay, so when I was in college, I was the only athlete in my class. And that meant whenever any of the physical tests came about, I was volunteered to be the dummy, okay? And what I mean by that is that every Bruce protocol, treadmill test, Wingate test, aerobic endurance test, VO2 max, maximum effort, social facilitation, performance standard, you name it, I was the one that got thrown into it. We had a couple other athletes, but a lot of them were in season at the time, so they just didn't want to push themselves in a class setting, so I was the guy, okay? So my story on my VO2 max is I had two of them. I had a Wingate test, number one, that shows you the Wingate does optimal, let me make sure I get this exactly right. The Wingate anaerobic test is arguably one of the most famous laboratory fitness tests. It is commonly performed on a cycle ergometer and is primarily used to measure an individual's anaerobic capacity and anaerobic power outputs. In its simplest form, this can be done using a bicycle, an ergometer, seated bike, and a stopwatch. As this test only requires the participant to cycle for a maximum effort of 30 seconds. In its simplicity, the time and effectiveness means it is extremely popular testing protocol, though the test is predominantly performed on a cycler ergometer. Geez, it can also be performed on an arm crank ergometer. All right, so basically what this is it's 10%, let me make sure I have that right. It's 10% of your body weight sitting on 7.5% of the participant's body weight sitting on the resistance wheel, okay? So for me, I was like 235 times, it was 17.6 pounds, so basically 20. I think they put 20 pounds of resistance. It's literally a plate with a spring on it. They put a 20-pound plate. That plate sits as a resistance on the wheel when you're spinning and you're biking. And they give you 3, 2, 1, go, and you just spin as hard as you possibly can. And your max anaerobic output, okay, is about 10 seconds. And then you really start to struggle for the next 10. And then the last 10 seconds it feels like an eternity. It's exhausting, okay? But you measure your anaerobic threshold, how high you can push, and then your maximal power output, okay? So that was the first one. That's not a VO2 test, but it was the most unpleasant test I've ever done. And then I did a VO2 test with the headgear, with the oxygen mask, all that. I did it on a treadmill. And so it's, every 2 minutes, I won't look that one up, but it's like every 2 minutes, it increases in speed and in a height. And so you gradually go faster and higher and faster and higher and faster and higher. And you go until, I had the harness and everything on, and you go until you get thrown off the treadmill. Like you go until you literally cannot keep up anymore. And you're like, and you just go flying off the back of this thing. I mean, it's every little ounce that you have, and that's your maximal power, maximal cardiovascular output. Like you cannot go anymore. And that whole time they're measuring how much oxygen you're pulling in, how much you're blowing out, like what your maximal volume is. And they can give you highs, lows, tidal volume, all of that kind of stuff, your averages, all of that. And then from there, you have all your work capacity zones now, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, all of that, all the way up to zone 5. You have all these zones that are then classified. So then I got to do that with just running on the treadmill. Then the next time I did it, I used hiking poles the following week, and we did it again, and I got to see how I did with that. And basically what we found is that I had an ability to work at a higher threshold using my arms, but for a shorter period. So you're using more of your body, so you can technically work a little bit harder, because when I was running on the treadmill, my arms didn't do much other than swing back and forth, but now I can push with my arms. So I was recruiting more. I was able to produce more power and to be able to charge along at a little more efficiently. However, it didn't last as long because I'm burning up my energy system, because I am using more, like 20% or 18% or something like that more by utilizing my arms. So I got to do VO2 tests twice, and ideally you're going to hit the same score. It's just when did I peak and all that kind of stuff. So a whole bunch of sciencey stuff that I don't understand all that well, other than I figured out, 22 years ago, whatever that was, what my VO2 max was at that time. I had 2 full functioning lungs, or at least I thought I did. I did have a tumor growing in there at the time. So that was 3 years before I had my lung removed. So that's 2005, right around in there, we were doing this. And as he says, extremely uncomfortable, but I had a good score, a healthy score. And still to this day, I will utilize that information to help me with my zones and targeting where I train at, specifically for rucking and such. So should you go out and get a VO2 test, you definitely can. I would suggest training for a little bit first. If you're completely sedentary and you're like, oh, I want to get back into shape, here's what I would do. Start walking a mile every day, okay? Every single day, go outside and the average person walks 20 minutes a mile, okay? So you can do 2 things. You can measure out a mile wherever your neighborhood is and you're safe, okay? Make sure you look both ways and don't talk to strangers and all that happy jazz. And do a mile, right? A half a mile out, a half a mile back, there's your mile. Or do 10 minutes away from your house and 10 minutes back. And whatever that average is fine. I kind of like the second one better, the 10 minutes away, 10 minutes back, because at 10 minutes you can go, oh, I made it to this house, right? And as you get into better shape and you start going faster, you'll start increasing that distance naturally. You'll start going to the next house and the next house and the next house. And before you know it, your 20-minute mile is now like a 17.5-minute mile, which means another 2.5 minutes of walking that way, right, that you get to go. So I could be blocks further down than I was when I started. And once you get to a point where you can average, 17 minutes, 17.5 minutes a mile, which is awesome, okay? It means you have a good solid gait and you're striding and you're doing well. Then you can start to add more mileage if you want. But the ultimate goal would be, in my opinion, like 15 miles a week could be awesome. If you were doing a mile or 2 every day, let's say you did 2 miles every day, 7 days a week, that's 14 miles right there. Or if you want to do every other day and you do, 3 miles, 4 miles every other day, there's 12 to 16 miles right there. So if you could get into double-digit miles walking, okay, get into 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s, somewhere in there every week, that would be fantastic. You don't have to go crazy with it. You don't have to start carrying a bunch of weight, nothing. Just start getting your aerobic capacity up. And you could do that simply by walking. And then if that goes well and you want to increase things a little bit, you could wear a vest or you could wear a backpack, and we're talking 5 pounds or 8 pounds, and you could put on 1 or 2 pound wrist weights. Okay, and go out for your walks now, called rucks at that point, because you're carrying load, and do the exact same thing you've been doing and start to kind of build that in. That will give you an overload. That'll give you greater bone density, more muscle recruitment, and increase your cardiorespiratory threshold. Okay. Then after, let's say, 2 or 3 months of doing that, then go get your blood work done. Then go get a VO2 test. Then go do a body fat test. Then go do a bone scan. Maybe in the beginning, if you really want to get a great image of what your body is now and then what it will be a year from now when you train, maybe do the body scan first, the bone density scan first, but then, get into training a little bit before you do a VO2 or anything else. If you wanted to do a Wingate or any of those other things, they're quite miserable. So I wouldn't go diving into them untrained, would be my point. It'll make you very sore, very unpleasant. And after we did our our Wingate test, not to go on forever about this, but we were testing for how much protein basically my body was, I believe. We were testing for, we were doing urine tests every 30 minutes to see like the acidity in my urine or something like that. I don't remember exactly what we were doing there, but I know I had to constantly be drinking water, and every 30 minutes for the next 4 hours, I want to say, I had to do a pee test. And we continued to test it to see its level of acidity and like when my body went into something. Anyhow, I'll leave that to the science geeks out there. All due respect, you do all the research. I love it. I just read about it. And that is an area of expertise that I do not have. Anyhow, there's a little insight into VO2 testing and how the higher your VO2 test is, the higher your score, the longer potential, greater chance of longevity that you have, higher quality of life, and you're reducing drastically your risk of mortality. So encourage anaerobics, start encouraging aerobic training with walking and or biking or swimming or whatever non-high impact exercise you would like to do to start off, and eventually build up from there. All right, comments, questions, hit me up down below. If not, continue to fight your good fight against sarcopenia. We'll see you in the next one.